Good morning. Thank you all for being here for the press conference to announce the Conservative Caucus's 2013 agenda. The Conservative Caucus is a caucus made up of about 30 House members and about a dozen senators who advocate for conservative legislation in the House of Delegates and in the Senate on a host of issues ranging from economic, fiscal issues, job-related issues, to social issues, family issues, to freedom and liberty issues as well. Conservatives are proud of our accomplishments in the House and in the Senate, and we look forward to building on those successes this year with a number of different bills. It's a positive agenda, as you'll see, divided into those three different categories: creating jobs and encouraging opportunity and economic progress. The second category, strengthening and protecting families. The third category, limiting government, defending freedom. We invite delegates and senators to come down during the press conference to talk about their specific legislation that they'll be working on. The Conservative Caucus works closely with a diverse array of organizations, but the ones here, I see the Catholic Conference here, I see the Family Foundation here as well, work with groups that range from Americans for Prosperity to the League of Independent Baptists. So each meeting, which occurs Tuesday mornings at 7:30, is one that covers a wide range of issues. So I'm pleased to be here with my co-chair, Senator Mark Obenshain, and I'll yield the mic to him for some remarks, and then we'll hear from the legislators.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Yep. My name is Mark Obenshain. I've been co-chair of the Conservative Caucus for 8 years, and we have been a positive voice for government reform, for standing up for family values, and for economic freedom during the course of my tenure in the General Assembly. It's been a pleasure to work with Ben Klein and many legislators who have linked arms in order to advance the agenda. Last year we were very successful with our agenda. This year I expect the same. My contribution to the agenda this year really falls in three areas. I continue the battle that I've worked on since 2005, and that is to improve integrity in our voting system. Back in 2000, following the Bush-Gore election, the bipartisan Carter-Baker Commission put together a set of recommendations for improving the integrity of our voting system, and identified the need for more effective identification requirements as one of the most compelling needs that existed. And we have been fighting for years. Before I began this fight, when I came to the General Assembly, to implement an enhanced identification requirement, including photo ID. I introduced photo ID back then in 2005, and we're continuing to push for it now. And I think that every year as we continue to push for that, we hear cries from the opposition that there is no problem, it doesn't exist. And exhibit number one for the existence of the problem was a certain videotape that was received national attention during the course of this past year's general election, emanating from Northern Virginia, in which it sure seemed as if a staff member for a congressional candidate was shopping for ways or participating in discussions that were intended to circumvent the voting identification requirement that we have through fraudulent means. We need more effective identification requirements, and I believe photo ID is one of the ways. I also have an innovative additional approach as an alternative or additional approach. The Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles has photos of virtually every driver in Virginia, probably upwards of 98% of all eligible voters in Virginia. And already the State Board of Elections has access to the records of the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, and my bill would require DMV to port over to the State Board of Elections the photographs and the identifying information about drivers in order to put that in the electronic poll book. So when I, Mark Obenshain, go in to vote, picture and identifying information of me pops up in the electronic poll book so that the election officials checking us in have, in addition to the identification that we bring, which will hopefully include a photo ID, an actual image of me taken by the Department of Motor Vehicles. It just simply makes common sense. It's a low-cost approach that helps bridge the gap and imposes no additional burden on anyone, except to the extent it requires you to look like the photograph that DMV took some years ago. It doesn't seem like much of a burden to me. I also have continued to fight for economic freedom, and the caucus has continued to fight for economic freedom over the years. Last year, one of our priorities as a caucus was the eminent domain constitutional amendment, which Rob patroned in the House and I patroned in the Senate, and we were pleased with the result of the polls. The fight continues, and the next front, and one of the most serious challenges faced by property owners are arbitrary decisions by local governments, and there are a number of pieces of legislation that are on our agenda, including one that I introduced that shifts the burden to local government for a good cause in the event that they deny property owners rights that they are entitled to under the law. It seems a common sense approach to help level the playing field for property owners in fighting City Hall. And finally, we continue our fight for education reform. Jimmy Massey, Bill Stanley, and I last year carried the first school choice legislation to ever get through the Virginia General Assembly. It's modeled after Florida, in which 30,000 kids today, 53,000 kids today are receiving education in the schools of their choice, and hopefully we can generate results that compare to or exceed those results here in the Commonwealth. And we continue to push for additional educational reform in Virginia, carrying the charter school constitutional amendment, which will help Virginia to further improve our outstanding status as one of the nation's best school systems. But we, as you know, we compete on a world stage, and being good enough is not enough. It's not good enough to say we're good. We want to be better, and our children deserve better. And this has never been a partisan issue elsewhere in the country. It's not a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. It's an issue that means a lot to our children and is going to make our schools better, not just private schools, not just charter schools, but public schools as well, and is going to improve the quality of the education that we're affording our kids. The Conservative Caucus does a great job of linking arms and making sure that our members are well aware of and are working together on these initiatives, and we couldn't function well without the support of our supporting organizations like the Catholic Conference, Family Foundation, Independent Baptists, and the many other groups, Virginia Society for Human Life and others who partner with us in this process. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Next one here from Delegate Rob Bell.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to say I'm very pleased to have the endorsement of 4 of the bills I've introduced by the Conservative Caucus. House Bill 1787 is the photo ID no exceptions bill. It would require a voter to present an actual photo ID issued by a government agency before voting. It includes provisions to provide both the ID and the underlying documentation for free if the voter cannot afford it. House Bill 1788 would require at the time of registration, a citizenship check to make sure that people that are attempting to register are in fact eligible American citizens. House Bill 1789 would require drug screening and in certain cases actual drug testing of welfare recipients before they receive cash benefits. And then House Bill 1442 is the TiVo bill. This is an ongoing effort we've had for several years. This would allow homeschoolers to participate in athletics and extracurriculars at their local high school. Again, I appreciate the endorsement by the Conservative Caucus. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Delegate Bell. Next one here from Delegate Jimmy Massey.
Thank you, Ben. I'm on that cleanup today. I'm really doing kind of Massey light this year in terms of legislation. I got 7 bills. I had 7 bills passed in 2012. Many of them initiatives I've been working on for a lot of years. So I'm going to kind of wait and see who the next governor is and then take it on. But I want to thank Ben and Mark and for being, co-chairman of the Conservative Caucus, and Rob for his participation. And I want to thank our caucus, our speaker, and our majority leader. We are really fortunate in Virginia. We have good conservative government. And let's look at the results of that. Virginia is the best managed state. the best state to do business in, fourth best state to raise a child in. Virginia has the finest public system of higher education in the country. And all of that is a result of good conservative leadership, and it flows through this Conservative Caucus. Now, for that performance I just told you, Virginia's in the top 5 of everything. We charge our citizens in Virginia the 49th lowest price in the country. State and local taxation as a percentage of the average Virginian's income is the 49th lowest. That, as a business person, that is a compelling value. Top 5 performance for the 49th lowest price. So we're going to continue to carry the ball here in Virginia, both fiscally and socially, and we're going to continue to have perform, give you all, our taxpayers, our constituents, our customers, a great value. I think, and you contrast that, there's plenty to contrast that with California, New York, Illinois, even Maryland. You know, that performance just doesn't happen. It's the result of good conservative leadership. So I want to thank everybody here. I want to thank the Family Foundations here at the Catholic Conference, all our partners in the private sector. We have a lot to be thankful for in the state of Virginia. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Jim. At this point, I think we're happy to take some questions about specific bills or about the agenda in general. Noting that several of the patrons aren't here, would be better served to speak to their own bills, but happy to take questions. Right?
Who provided the 49th lowest ranking?
I think he means 49th highest and second lowest. I think
J-Lark.
he means.
Go get your J-Lark. Go up to J-Lark and get your J-Lark book. It's right there in J-Lark. Book.
Who's lowest?
Huh?
Who's lowest? Who's ahead of
Oh,
us?
who's the head of this? You know,
I used to know.
I think it's a small state out west.
It's Utah.
It might be Utah. I don't know. Ray, you look at the J-Lark book. I got it on my desk. Kelly?
Hey, David, I was hoping you could explain to me a little bit more about this Senate Bill 1074, student organizations prohibits higher educational institutions from religious discrimination.
Sure.
What does that do? What does it come from? Why do we need it?
Basically is a conscious protection bill. There are a number of schools across the country who have basically mandated that student organizations can't discriminate even on legitimate, rational bases in picking leadership and members. For example, a student Christian organization on campus would have to pick an atheist for its leadership, or the student Democrats would have to pick a Republican. There's certain rational, reasonable, non-invidious discriminations that occur every day, and some of these policies that have been well-intentioned policies that have been adopted by colleges across the country have the effect of really preventing or permitting people from making mischief. They don't make sense, and it was never presumably it was never the intention of these policymakers to force the young socialist to accept the young capitalist as its president.
Are there any schools in Virginia that have policy?
My understanding is that there have been instances in which student organizations have had challenges with similar policies. I'll get you details about schools that do and don't. Sure.
The speaker has said last week that they plan on focusing, on the economy and jobs and not going to focus so much on some of the social issues that came up last year. I'm wondering if, issues like transportation and education and possibly uranium mining coming up during this short session, why do you all feel like it's still important to deal with those issues now?
Well, conservatives advocate for conservative policies across a wide range of issues, and our agenda reflects that. We have delegates and senators who are interested in working on job-related bills. The caucus, the Republican caucus, is very focused on job-related bills, and as it affects transportation. The Conservative Caucus will definitely be involved. I've commented on the governor's transportation plan from my own point of view and my hopes for it, that it is revenue neutral, that there's a lockbox in place, and that there are not excessive fee increases on working families. But uranium mining is another issue that is controversial, but conservatives will definitely be involved in that issue as well. But we don't limit ourselves to any one area. Conservatives have opinions and advocate conservative policies on a host of areas, including social issues, including freedom and liberty issues.
Do you feel like there's going to be time to deal with those issues this year with another big priority looming, and we got 47 days left?
We have successfully dealt with all those issues before, and I'm optimistic we can do it again.
I also wanted to ask Delegate Bell, could you talk about your drug testing bill specifically? Have you identified how much of a problem this is here in Virginia, and also who would pay for this drug testing? People trying to get the benefits have to pay?
There are 4 different bills out there, different approaches with regards to some of the issues you're raising. We just talked about mine. Mine would say that they will develop a screening mechanism, and if they identify someone through the screening mechanism as the appropriate candidate for an actual test, we'll ask the person to take the test. If the person refuses or if the test comes back positive, the person will begin receiving those cash benefits. This is TANF for 12 months. And the thought would be that it would serve a couple of purposes. The first would be that providing the cash for someone who is in fact actively using illegal drugs is literally to provide the fuel for the fire. In other words, it is not only are you not helping them, but you're giving them the cash they use to continue the drug use. And then the second would be obviously concerned about wasting the money that you have a certain amount of resources to expend, and you want it to go to someone who needs it or their family members rather than to the guy in the corner who's selling them the crack or the methamphetamine or whatever it is that they're using. There would be a cost to the system both for training people and then for the tests. Those would not be directly visited upon the person who is the recipient, but they would have the benefits cut off. So,
Just on that, just so I understand, yours aims only at cash TANF benefits. Doesn't it?
that is what my bill does. There are other bills that do other things, but mine are the cash benefits.
I was wondering if the caucus could speak to broadly gun control being brought up. There's a press conference underway right now talking about the issue in the wake of the Newtown tragedy. Lots of ideas on both sides have been floated around. What has the caucus position been in regards to school safety and what needs to be done?
The caucus strongly supports Second Amendment rights, and in light of the tragedy in Newtown, we will be examining our policies regarding school safety. We do recognize that when it comes to school resource officers, we have a successful successful program in place that covers 80% of middle and high school and 30% of elementary schools. The speaker and Bev Sherwood have proposed expanding that program. We think that's worthy of consideration. The caucus doesn't have a specific position on any of the legislation out there yet, but I think say with confidence that conservatives will be involved in those debates as they move forward. Yes.
Does the caucus have a position on the governor's transportation plan?
No. I think that there are a variety of opinions. I think conservatives, and I, again, only speak for myself, conservatives want to see taxes kept low on Virginia. They want to see a plan in place that locks in transportation funding for transportation purposes and not diverted to other uses. And they want to make sure that working families aren't subjected to excessive fee hikes. Again, that's my position on the bill. I've conveyed that to the governor. I'm hoping to see the bill as it moves through the process reflect those priorities, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to comment further.
I think the good news on that, Sean, is there is a consensus. We haven't taken a caucus position. There is a consensus that transportation is an issue. We've got to address the issue, especially an issue in Northern Virginia, down in Hampton Roads. Here in Central Virginia, not so much. So I think that's the positive thing. There is that consensus. Has a consensus developed on how to, deal with that yet? Not yet, and that's what we're working on.
Good question.
You
Shelley?
want to take that one, Senator?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree that clearly, from one side of the Commonwealth to the other, whether you're in Northern Virginia, Richmond, or Hampton Roads, or even points west, transportation is a significant concern. I give the governor and the architects of this plan high marks for creativity, and frankly, I think that the challenge calls for a creative approach. There are challenges with this plan that concern me, and I've communicated those to the governor. It's my hope that it's going to be a starting place for something that is going to be workable. It remains to be seen. Very seldom does a bill get introduced that winds up getting passed in the form in which it initiated, and we all have different views about how transportation ought to be addressed. As a matter of fact, I believe, number one, we have a long-standing promise that has been made by governors current and past to lock up our transportation trust fund. We need to fulfill that promise so the voters of Virginia have confidence that our transportation funds are going to be dedicated to transportation, not in the future diverted. I think we also have had $1.4 billion in surpluses over the past 3 years, which has been great and is a real tribute to the governor's fiscal management of the state. Unfortunately, only a very small percentage of those surplus funds have been committed to transportation. That represents a huge missed opportunity, I think. Notwithstanding that, there are cranes up and operating. There's construction going on in Northern Virginia and elsewhere that is presently making a meaningful difference to commuters in those regions of the state. And that progress is not to be, shouldn't be given short shrift. It's significant, it's meaningful, but we've got a lot more to do.
Can one of you talk about sort of the philosophical, the Conservative Caucus and in Virginia, conservatism often means opposition to taxes or tax increases. The way the governor presented his plan is it's revenue neutral now, and then the sales tax grows. How do you all feel about increasing the sales tax to pay for transportation?
Well, what I would tell you is that I've got, and I've expressed a number of concerns. One is that, when you look back at some of the previous transportation fixes that have been proposed, one of the biggest challenges, of course, some of those have been that it's imposed more of a burden on Virginians and less on out-of-staters. And this is structurally set up so that Virginia drivers and non-drivers alike are going to bear perhaps a disproportionate share of the cost of maintaining and improving our transportation system in Virginia, and out-of-state drivers who use our roads every day of the week, with the exception of truckers, will be largely exempt from the cost. And yeah, it does concern me that we are looking at a new tax in a situation in which we, as I said, over the past 4 years generated $1.4 billion in surplus funding and surplus funds, and have had an opportunity, and frankly the governor had proposed last year and I guess the year before to permanently move some of those surplus funds into the transportation trust fund. We should have done it. We would have been money ahead, and we would have had more asphalt going down on the ground today if we had done that, and it wouldn't have undermined any of our educational priorities or public safety priorities in the process.
Sure, Jim.
we got a little semantical difference, and this discussion happens at the national level too. I think conservatives have always been against increasing marginal tax rates, but not against increasing government revenue due to economic growth. And so there's a I think a really important semantical difference there. In the state of Virginia, we believe in having the best managed state, the best state to do business in, and that creates a rising tide, broadening the tax base, lowering marginal tax rates, and you'll generate more revenue. And so I think there's a different, we lose this distinction in the national discussion. People talk about increasing taxes. Everybody always jumps to increasing marginal tax rates, which you're referring to. Increasing marginal tax rate is like punishing your child. When you punish your child, you get less of the behavior. When you increase marginal tax rates, you get less of that behavior. So what conservatives have always believed in, yeah, we want to have increasing revenues, but we want to do that by broadening the base and lowering rates. Okay? And that will create a rising tide. And if you go back and look at the Kennedy tax cuts, the Reagan tax cuts, and the Bush tax cuts, just go back and look what happened to federal revenue. It exploded in all three of those instances. You lowered marginal tax rates. So I think that's a key distinction that we need to keep focused on.
And I think conservatives recognize that economic growth can produce increased revenues. I don't think anyone, I think some conservatives would, in certain areas of government, want to see less of it. Transportation is one area where we recognize the need for increased funding. And the governor's produced a plan that, while close to revenue neutral now, would grow with economic growth in the out years. I've said that I hope that it is. I've been told it's a work in progress, and that we can hopefully achieve revenue neutrality in the first year as it moves through the committee process. But Jimmy's absolutely right. Economic growth produces additional revenues, and as prices go up for transportation, we need to be able to keep pace. Revenues need to be able to keep pace. So this is a forward-thinking proposal that has so many different ramifications that it was just unveiled to us last week, that we're still working through the effects on a variety of issues, in-state versus out-of-state, drivers versus non-drivers. So we're still working on it. Conservatives will have their own opinions and discussions about it. Hopefully we'll have some more to say on that eventually. Dickie Bell, Congressman from Stanton, has showed up. Congressman, delegate from Stanton has showed up.
Thank you very much.
Has some comments about his portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Ben, for the promotion. Appreciate it.
Or demotion, whatever you want. Whatever you want to say.
I apologize for being tardy.
They said didn't call you senator.
Thank you. I have several bills that are part of the Conservative Caucus agenda this year, and I'm not going to try to address all of them. Many are in the realm of education, both K-12 education and higher education. I've had discussions with the new Inspector General about performing a financial and performance audit of our four-year colleges and institutions. I have an uneasy constituency who wants to know where the money goes. And I know there are things in place right now. I know there's a JLARC study. I'm aware of all that. But we need, as far as I'm concerned, and I think most conservatives are, the transparency level at those institutions must improve, can improve, and must improve. I also have an amendment, a right to work amendment, which I guess is one of the most important pieces of my legislation. We have a right to work law in Virginia. I hear constantly from the other side that we don't need an amendment to the Constitution. I'm the first person to tell you that I don't think we should tamper with the Constitution unless it's necessary. I'm also a realist, and I look around and I see what's happening in this country to the right to work. There are 24 states now that have a right to work law. We have a law. It's not been challenged significantly to this point, but I believe in being proactive. And I don't believe there'd be any use for a constitutional amendment once we have a serious challenge to our right to work. We're one of the best states in the country to do business. We maintain that status consistently. One of the reasons is because we're a right-to-work state. We have a strong right-to-work law. So I believe we should make that permanent by making it a part of the Virginia Constitution. I'll also be carrying a bill for the governor, on the governor's behalf, that is not a teacher contract bill. We're not calling it that. But it does impact teachers. It's a performance bill. It's an effective teacher bill, as we're calling it. And I think that's probably going to be the centerpiece of my legislation. It's important to us to complete this education reform that the governor has in place. The other bills, some other bills I have deal with basically with school choice. That's a fundamental conservative idea, and it's something I support. And with that, I will step aside rather than go through the whole review. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Well, thank you all. We look forward to working on this agenda moving forward and having another successful session for conservative ideas. Thank you.